Hey guys, welcome back. Today's Reddit story is absolutely chilling. Grab your tea, get cozy, and let's get started. The final words I ever heard out of her mouth were her calling me a loser while she literally choked on another guy's name. After that, she vanished. There was no dramatic door slamming. No suitcases getting hurled out of a second-story window. Just a sudden, total void. Honestly, it felt like someone had just right-clicked on her and hit delete from my reality. 1 second, I'm a guy with a wife. The next, I'm just a blank space she couldn't care less about explaining herself to. I didn't go venting on social media. I didn't blast her friends' phones. I didn't throw a tantrum or scratch up anyone's paint job. I just quietly faded out of her existence. Entirely. And for 3 long years, I just let that be the status quo. I buried myself in dead-end odd jobs and a mind-numbing routine. I kept my head down whenever I walked. I even stopped buying anything red just because it brought back the memory of her lipstick. Then, exactly 3 years, 9 days, and 4 hours later, there she was. She was strolling along the shoreline without shoes, right next to some guy wearing a shirt that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked older, not out of shape or anything, just different. It was like she transformed into a completely new person during the time I spent trying to forget she ever drew breath. Then, her eyes hit me, and that arrogant, confident walk she always had, the exact one she used when she walked out on me like a piece of forgotten luggage at a Greyhound station, it just completely fell apart. Right there on the sand. Her grip slipped off the guy's arm like she suddenly didn't even recognize him. Seeing her freeze up like that really should have been plenty for me. But it wasn't. See, here's the part she had absolutely no clue about. I didn't end up on that shoreline by pure luck. I didn't just accidentally drift back into her life like some miserable ex-husband caught up in a freak accident of karma. Not a chance. I wanted her to look at me. I needed her to see exactly what she threw away. Because while she was out there spinning a beautiful new fantasy, I was quietly laying down the tracks for the truth to completely derail her life. You see, the trick to pulling off a disappearing act is that if you play it right, people don't even realize you're gone until it's way too late. And Tessa was dead certain I'd just dissolve into nothingness after what she pulled. In her mind, she probably pictured me drinking myself to sleep, staring at old wedding albums, and texting her massive paragraphs at 2 in the morning that she'd just ignore. That's the exact version of me she bought into. A guy who would break without making a sound. A guy who wouldn't stand up for himself. Man, was she wrong. I didn't break down. I bent. I adapted to the hit. I changed. I went through hell. Yeah, absolutely. Ton of it. But after the pain, I started planning. What do you think about this? Would you have done the same thing or just let it go? That beach wasn't some random spot I picked out of a hat. It was the exact same stretch of sand where we had our so-called clean break. Our final talk, or to be more accurate, her final lecture. See, she never actually let me get a word in. She just told me I was emotionally draining to be around. She said being married to me was like living in a cramped box. I remember those exact words clear as day because they've been looping in my brain for years. Not because they cut deep, though they definitely did, but because they were just so incredibly lazy. That's the part that really ate at me. After everything we went through, she couldn't even be bothered to come up with a genuine excuse. She dumped me for a guy named Griffin, and she framed it like I practically forced her into his bed by just being too stable. So when I stepped onto that sand last week, it wasn't to take in the ocean view. It was to finish a piece of business. She stared at me like she'd just run into a ghost she forgot to properly bury. The new guy, this polished, overpriced knockoff version of me, started to open his mouth, but she immediately reached out and clamped onto his arm like she was the one who needed a bodyguard. Her voice literally trembled when she said my name. Melvin. Just Melvin. And you know what the best part was? I didn't say a single word back. I just looked at her. One heavy, silent look. No anger behind it. No sadness. Just completely done. She took a step toward me. Her feet kinda hitched, like she couldn't decide whether she should walk toward me or stay with him. I could practically see the gears turning in her head. How much did I actually know? What was I doing there? Did I look better than I used to? Honestly, that last one probably cut the deepest. Because the reality was, I did look a hell of a lot better. I dropped some weight. I ditched the glasses. I was wearing a clean, simple gray jacket and dark denim. Nothing loud, but definitely not that oversized, dorky sweater she used to rip on me for wearing. I had grown comfortable in my own silence. And right then, that silence was drowning out anything I could have actually shouted. She started stammering out something about how unexpected this was, asking what I was even doing there. But I didn't blink. See, I knew a secret she didn't. I knew exactly who the guy standing next to her was. I knew what he'd been keeping from her. And I knew with absolute, undeniable certainty that before the sun went down, she'd bitterly regret ever setting foot on that beach. She just kept staring at me like she was waiting for me to give her permission to breathe. Meanwhile, that arrogant prick next to her had zero clue what was actually going on. He tried to grab her hand again, and she yanked it back like she was suddenly completely embarrassed to be seen touching him. I watched her try to pull herself together, standing there in this flowing beach dress looking like a walking advertisement for a perfect life. Everything about her was curated to look completely effortless and happy. But I knew where the cracks were. I used to live inside them. "I didn't know you were back in town," she finally managed to say. Her voice was much softer than I remembered it. It sounded hesitant, like finding the perfect tone of voice could somehow wipe away everything she did to me. "It's been a really long time." I just lifted an eyebrow. That was it. Because if I actually opened my mouth, I was probably going to start laughing. And if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop. The absolute nerve of this woman. She was acting like we were just two old high school buddies bumping into each other in the produce aisle. Like she hadn't left me completely gutted and humiliated in my own living room 3 years ago, holding a single backpack while her phone blew up with selfies of her and Griffin. And speaking of Griffin, the guy was standing right there. That's what made this whole setup so beautifully ironic. See, she had no idea I was in the loop. But I knew the whole story. The guy standing beside her wasn't just some recent rebound that turned into something serious. He was the exact guy she cheated on me with. The one she swore up and down was just a platonic friend she was texting during our final blowout argument. I recognized him the exact second I spotted the tattoo on his left forearm. It was the same one I noticed in a photo she accidentally airdropped to our shared iPad 2 weeks before she packed her bags. And now, here he was, grinning like an idiot like he hadn't just shattered 2 separate marriages with one greasy smile. I didn't utter a syllable. I just let them stew in the awkwardness. Tessa always absolutely detested silence. She told me once that quiet moments made her feel like the ceiling was about to cave in. So, I turned that silence into a weapon. I let it hang in the air between us like a loaded gun. I could see the confusion eating her alive. Why now? Why here? What am I after? Finally, she broke. "Are you doing okay?" she asked, tilting her head and trying to force her voice into this nurturing, caring tone. It was so incredibly fake it made my skin crawl. "I mean, after everything." "You mean after you walked out without a single word?" I said, cutting her off completely. My voice stayed totally level. I didn't even raise the volume. "Or do you mean after that voicemail where you forgot to hit end, and I got to listen to him laugh in the background about how I was still folding your clothes?" Griffin went completely rigid. Tessa's eyes went wide, her mouth dropping open in total shock. "Melvin, I just held up a hand. Not to be aggressive, just to shut her up. I wasn't buying into the drama this time. You lied to me. You walked out. You replaced me. Honestly, it's fine. I've come to terms with all of it," I told her. "But what you don't know and what you never bothered to check on is that I didn't just disappear. I rebuilt my life. And today, I showed up here on purpose." She started blinking fast, the exact way she used to whenever she got caught red-handed but hadn't cooked up a backup story yet. Her eyes kept darting from me to Griffin and back again. She was completely spinning out because she didn't have a script for this version of me. Not for this calm, collected, silent Melvin. The guy she walked out on 3 years ago would have been in tears. This version didn't have to shed a single one. Griffin took a step forward like he was about to try and say something clever. But right before he could get a word out, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Perfect timing. I pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and let out a tiny smile. Then I flipped the phone around so she could get a clear look at it. It was a picture. A slightly blurry photo taken through a car window. It was a shot of Griffin. And he was with another woman. Not Tessa. Not me. And definitely not a new acquaintance. Tessa's face turned completely white. Griffin turned bright red. My silence just kept doing all the heavy lifting, louder than either of them could possibly handle. I didn't need to get dirty revenge. I just needed the cold truth to walk right up to their faces and detonate. She didn't say a word for a long moment. Her eyes were just glued to that screen like she was looking at a hallucination she could force away if she just blinked hard enough. But the camera didn't lie. It was Griffin very clearly leaning in close to some girl inside a vehicle. The body language told the whole story. His hand was planted right on her thigh. The girl was laughing with her mouth wide open, her messy hair caught in his fingers. This wasn't a friendly catch-up. It wasn't a bad misunderstanding. It was definitive proof. It was validation that the guy she wrecked my marriage for had already moved on to the next thing, or honestly, probably never stopped looking in the first place. Tessa finally shifted her head toward him, moving slow and stiff, like her neck didn't even want to face what was coming next. "Who is that?" she demanded. And just for a second, I could hear her old self coming through. That demanding, authoritative tone she used back when she was used to calling the shots. But Griffin wasn't cut out for a real fight. I could see it instantly. He just gave that awkward, nervous laugh guys use when they have absolutely no defense for getting busted. "It's really not what it looks like," he mumbled. Of course it wasn't. That's the classic line. They always say that. I almost felt bad for the guy. Tessa backed away from him like he was suddenly covered in radiation. She crossed her arms, but it was just a performance. A totally weak shield. She looked back at me, and this time, there was a completely different expression in her eyes. It was fear. Not the kind of fear that makes you bolt. It was the realization that you've burned down every single bridge behind you, and the guy you wronged is the one holding the map. "Why would you show up here just to do this?" she asked, her voice dropping low and cutting sharp. "Is this just some petty revenge?" I took a slow breath through my nose, completely calm, totally in control. "No," I told her. "Revenge would mean I actually still care. I just came out here to give you some clarity. That's all. You stole 3 years of my life, Tessa. The very least I could do is take 10 minutes out of yours." She let out a scoff, but the sound was totally empty. I could see her brain working overtime, desperate to find the next move, the next script, the next angle to turn herself into the victim. But nothing was sticking. Not today. "You told me you were doing fine," she snapped, almost talking to herself. "You said you were completely over it." I just nodded my head. "I am." Here is the final part of the story, fully rewritten in a natural first-person American style, perfectly optimized for an AI voiceover with clean, seamless phrasing. "Just because I've moved past the pain doesn't mean I completely blanked on what you pulled," I told her. "I didn't drop off the grid to make life easy for you. I did it to save myself. And yeah, I'm back. But only for a second. Just long enough to hold up a mirror so you can finally see yourself clearly." Griffin tried to mumble something under his breath, but honestly, neither of us gave a damn. Tessa was busy completely falling apart right in front of me. All that power she used to hold over me was just gone. She looked exactly like someone standing in the smoking ruins of a house they set on fire themselves, totally bewildered that the ashes were still hot enough to burn her feet. "I swear, Melvin, I had no clue he was." She started to choke out, but I just cut her off with a quick wave of my hand. "I really don't care," I said. "Whatever he's doing is your business, not mine. The real issue here is that you destroy people and act like it's just a walk in the park. You just walk away, rewrite history to make yourself look like the innocent victim, and honestly believe the consequences will never catch up to you. But the truth doesn't care how long it has to wait. And today it finally tracked you down." Her mouth opened up, but she couldn't even find the words. So, turning the tables from 3 years ago, I just turned around and walked away. I didn't yell. I didn't demand an explanation. I didn't even glance back over my shoulder. I just headed straight down the shoreline, letting the ocean breeze wash away every last trace of that desperate guy she thought would beg for her to come back. This time around, I wasn't the one who was broken. I was completely free. I didn't actually go that far, though. I just walked around the bend of the beach, right past the rock formations where tourists usually stop to snap pictures. I wasn't running away this time. I was just waiting, because the reality was, this story wasn't wrapped up just yet. See, what Tessa didn't know, and what she couldn't even begin to fathom, was that our little chat on the sand was only half the game plan. I took a seat on an old piece of driftwood facing the cliffs, listening to the wind howl loud enough to drown out the rest of the world, and pulled my phone back out. Sure enough, there was a fresh text waiting for me. She's still standing in the exact same spot. He just stormed off in the opposite direction. You called it perfectly. She is completely unraveling. A small smile hit my face. The text was from Lena. And no, she wasn't some new romantic interest or a rebound girl from my post-divorce comeback. Lena was someone way more practical and honestly way more dangerous to my ex. She was Griffin's wife. Or well, his soon-to-be ex-wife, depending on how the next couple of days played out. About 3 weeks back, Lena stumbled across my name in some ancient email thread. It was one of those classic accidental CC blunders that happens when cheaters start getting sloppy and lazy. She ended up reaching out to me through a burner account, just asking flat out if I was the Melvin who used to be married to Tessa. Apparently, her husband used to joke about me in his texts, calling me the emotional spreadsheet guy. That's literally how the guy talked about me. Like I was just some boring Excel document he could minimize and forget about. Lena was calm when she reached out. Way too calm, actually, which is exactly why I trusted her. There was no screaming or crying on the phone. Just cold, hard facts, timelines, and screenshots. Man, she had so many screenshots. She'd been quietly building her case for months, just biding her time for the perfect moment to drop the hammer. The only thing she was missing was a real face-to-face reality check. She needed proof that Griffin's smooth-talking charm was entirely fake. So I offered to help her get it. We mapped out the whole play. The dates, the timing, the exact spot. She knew Tessa and Griffin loved hitting that specific beach every Saturday morning. So I made sure I just happened to cross their paths. The whole thing was designed to look completely accidental. The talk, the confrontation, and my quiet exit. And Lena? She was sitting right across the boardwalk at the coffee truck, sipping a chai latte and watching the entire show play out like it was just a typical Saturday. Tessa had absolutely no clue she was being observed by the exact woman whose marriage she helped tear apart. I don't know if you want to call that karma. Honestly, I don't even know if I believe in karma anymore. But I do know that the second I walked away and left her standing there with the proof of Griffin's cheating fresh in her hands, I gave Lena the perfect opening. I have no idea what Lena actually said when she walked up to her. All I know is that she approached Tessa about 10 minutes after I left, and whatever came out of her mouth made Tessa drop straight down onto the wet sand like her legs couldn't support her weight anymore. That specific image is basically burned into my brain now. The woman who used to tell me I was emotionally brain-dead was suddenly completely cornered by the absolute disaster she created. She wasn't the main character anymore. She wasn't holding the cards. She was just a messy, exposed version of herself, completely stripped of the fairy tale she thought she ran. I didn't turn back to check on her. I didn't need to, because for the first time in 3 long years, I wasn't the guy left picking up the shattered pieces of a life. She was. The text came completely out of nowhere 3 days later, sandwiched right between a spam message about a free cruise and an automated reminder from my dentist. It was just a single line from a number I hadn't seen in years but still knew entirely by heart. Even now, looking at it on my screen, it didn't even register as loud. It just felt like a faint whisper. Can we talk? That was the whole thing. No apology attached. No explanation offered. Not even a question mark. Just the digital version of shoving her foot in my front door. And for a brief second, and I honestly hate admitting this to you, I actually hesitated. Not because I missed her at all. Not because I gave a single damn about what she had to say. I was just genuinely curious about the why. Why would someone like Tessa, who used to cut people out of her life like dead tree branches, suddenly want to have a chat? What could possibly be left for us to talk about? So I made her wait. I didn't reply that day, and I didn't reply the next day either. I just let it sit there. Let it stew. I wanted her to wonder if the exact same silence she used to use as a weapon against me had finally turned on her. I could practically picture her staring at her phone, biting her thumbnail, drafting up a bunch of messages and deleting them before she hit send. The woman who completely ghosted me was now desperately clinging to a ghost of her own making. On the 5th day, I finally sent a short response back. Say what you need to say here. I'm not meeting you in person. The reply popped up in less than 2 minutes. It was like she'd been sitting there with the app open, her fingers just hovering over the keyboard. You didn't have to humiliate me like that. Humiliate her. Seriously, that was her big takeaway from the whole situation. Not the cheating, not the total abandonment, and not the absolute wreckage she left in her wake like I was just old junk stored away in her attic. No, my actual presence was the issue. My silence was the real betrayal. I really should have just ignored it right then. I know that, but I found myself typing back anyway, keeping my pacing completely slow and deliberate. You're only upset because I finally forced you to feel exactly what you made me live through for years. No response came back for hours after that. I figured that was probably the end of the line, and that she'd just retreat back into whatever perfect fantasy world she was trying to build next. But that night, right after midnight, my phone lit up the dark room again. This time around, it wasn't an angry text. It was something completely raw. It started with a voice memo. I hesitated for a second before playing it, my thumb just lingering over the play icon. But curiosity got the better of me. She was crying. Honestly, I'd only ever heard this woman cry twice the entire time I knew her. Once was at her dad's funeral, and the other time was when she thought she lost her passport right before our vacation to Iceland. But this sound didn't match either of those moments. This was entirely different. She didn't even say anything for the first 10 seconds. It was just the audio of her trying to catch her breath and get herself together. Then, finally, her voice came through, sounding incredibly low and cracked. I had no idea he was stepping out on me too. I thought things were different with him. I thought leaving you meant I was finally choosing a better path for my life. She sniffled real hard on the recording. I don't even know what I was expecting when I ran into you. You just looked so incredibly calm, strong, like you were completely out of my reach now. And honestly, it terrified me, because you used to look at me like I was the only person in the entire world who mattered. There was another long pause on the tape, and then came the exact words that stuck in my head long after the audio track cut out. I think I broke something I can't ever fix, and I don't even know who I am if you don't hate me. I didn't send a reply back. Not that night. I just lay there in the pitch black, staring up at the ceiling with the warm phone resting in my palm. I wasn't feeling sad. I wasn't angry. I didn't even feel that smug sense of satisfaction you're supposed to get. I just felt completely finished with it. Not like a victor, not validated, just totally done. And sometimes, man, that is more than enough. The next morning, I woke up to another massive message from her. This one wasn't a voice clip. It was a straight wall of text. It looked like she'd finally broken through her own wall of silence and couldn't stop the words from pouring out if she tried. She poured her heart out about her regrets. She mentioned how she thought freedom was going to feel like flying, but instead, it just felt like falling down a bottomless pit. She actually typed out things I never in a million years expected to hear drop from her mouth. Lines like, I used you as a scapegoat and blamed you for everything I hated in myself. And, I thought walking out would make me feel alive, but all it did was make me feel like a complete stranger to myself. She flat out admitted that Griffin had been cheating on her from day one. She confessed that even when she packed her bags to leave me, she knew deep down there were other women in the picture. But she'd completely convinced herself that she was going to be the one to finally tame him. She figured he only acted out because he hadn't found the right woman yet, and she truly believed she was that girl. Spoiler alert, she wasn't. She told me she ended up having a massive blowout confrontation with him the night after the beach incident. She said she screamed, cried, begged, and even smashed a plate across the room. And you know what he did? He just stared at her like she was throwing a temper tantrum, told her, You knew exactly what this was from the start, and walked right out the door, just like she did to me once upon a time. So now she was entirely by herself. Not empowered, not free, not enlightened. Just completely alone. And all of a sudden, she wanted me back in her life. Not out of real love. I could read right through the lines on that one. But because she finally realized I was the only guy who ever actually stuck around. The only person who saw her chaos firsthand and still tried to hold her hand through the storm. She wrapped up the text with one final plea. If I ever meant a single thing to you, please just meet up with me one last time. Not to fight and not to try and fix us. Just meet me. It's crazy how words can hit you depending on the timing. A year ago, a text like that probably would have completely shattered me. I probably would have dropped everything I was doing and run straight back to her like she was home and I'd been locked out in the freezing cold for way too long. But now those words just felt incredibly late. I let that message sit for a whole day. I really thought about what a meeting would actually change at this point. I thought about the years I spent painstakingly gluing back the pieces of a life she blew up without a care in the world. And right then, I realized something important. She wasn't looking for closure at all. She was looking for comfort. She wanted to borrow a piece of my peace of mind because she didn't have any of her own. She wanted my healing to fix her guilt. But that's just not how life works. You don't get to completely demolish someone's foundation and then ask to take shelter on it the second your new house falls apart. So, I wrote her back very carefully. I don't hate you, but I'm not your crutch anymore. That was the end of it. I hit send and shut my phone completely down. And for the first time in years, there was no ache in my chest. No heavy feeling. No wondering what she was up to or who she was hanging out with. Just total silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence that used to haunt my nights. This time around, it just felt like pure peace. 2 weeks flew by after that. I didn't hear a single peep from her again. No follow-up texts, no massive guilt-tripping essays. Just quiet. For once, it was the kind of quiet that didn't hold any tension. Just a final resolution. It wasn't the silent treatment she used to punish me with, and it wasn't the silence I used to sit in like a prison cell. It was clean, it was final, and I knew deep down that she finally got the message. Probably for the first time in her entire life. I don't think she'll ever text my phone again. Not because she doesn't want to, but because she finally figured out that she doesn't have the right to. As for me, honestly, I moved on long before she ever spotted me standing on that beach. But I didn't truly realize how far I'd actually come until about a week after the whole showdown, when I bumped into someone completely unexpected at the local farmer's market. Her name was Nora. We used to work together years back, though our relationship never really went past small talk over burnt breakroom coffee and complaining about our old manager. Back in those days, she was going through a rough divorce, and I was quietly losing my mind inside my own crumbling marriage. We were basically just two ghosts pretending to be alive at our desks. But that morning, we both reached for the exact same jar of blackberry jam at a stand, and something just clicked. We both burst out laughing, I don't even recall over what, and wound up walking around the market together. It wasn't some heavy, forced romantic thing. It was just light, easy, and comfortable. She didn't know a single detail about my past drama, and I didn't bring it up either. Not at first, because for the first time in ages, I didn't feel like a guy hauling around a ton of emotional baggage. I felt like a completely new person. Someone who wasn't defined by the bad things that happened to him. Someone who had finally stepped out of a massive storm. Soaked and exhausted, sure, but still standing on his own 2 feet. We've gone on 3 casual walks since that day. No big expectations, no heavy labels attached. Just fresh air and real, honest conversations. And honestly, maybe that's all I really need right now. Tessa used to tell me all the time that I was completely predictable. But here's the major twist she never saw coming. I didn't just survive her walking out. I completely outgrew her. I left the past behind on that stretch of sand, standing in expensive sandals with a face full of regret, while I walked straight forward into a brand new life that doesn't need her approval or her apology. Sometimes, the absolute best revenge isn't watching them crash and burn. It's just showing up completely whole, healed, and happy while they're left wondering how you ever managed to stand back up in the first place.